I'm ready.
Okay, at this time, we're going to call to order the, no, we do not. We do not, Greg did not have one. Next document. That's one for tonight, okay. You do have it, Greg. That was Nancy's way of telling everybody to silence your cell
I
phones.
forgot to turn it off.
So I can.
Probably a kindergarten parent. That's all the only people that call me lately.
Okay, at this time, roll call, please.
Mrs. Grice?
Here.
Mr. Cremines?
Here.
Mr. Nemeth? Here. Mr. Journay?
Here.
Mr. Haas?
Here.
Thank you.
This time I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Mr. Nemish, seconded by Mr. Cremines. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Mr. Nemeth?
Yes.
Mr. Journay?
Here, yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Grice?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. This time, we'll begin the work session. And some things have changed since our last work session. And I'm going to ask Mr. Gonda, if you would, to come forward. He shared an email with the board. I don't know who, I didn't look who all was on.
Just the board and Greg.
Okay, just the board and Greg, so I would.
Yes, good evening.
And, well, I won't, Terry, if you'll just come on up and kind of explain. There is a handout, and I think Melinda's going to copy this handout
Yes.
for everybody, so everybody has a copy of this. But Terry, if you want to, I'll turn it over to you and.
You can grab that once in here, because I sent them. The last, well, for a little while now, but definitely for the last several days, extensively been digging into, there's debt limitations in Ohio Revised Code, which a school district can issue debt. Typically, it's a percentage of your valuation, of your property valuation. If you're over 4%, and like I sent in the email, there's certain things you have to do, pass resolutions and so on. If you're between 4 and 9%, not a big deal, Ohio Department of Tax, Ohio Department of Education. If you're over 9% of your valuation, they make you start jumping through some hoops. You have to put together a 10-year historical trend of your property valuations, and then they also want you to put a 10-year projection together going forward. What they do at that point, they look at mainly the last 5 years of your historical trend, and they think, all right, how much have you grown in property valuation? How much, essentially residential, agricultural, commercial, has your property valuation gone up? That's valuation. Ours has almost been 11.9%, so just a little under 12%. At that point, what you can do is you can take our 2016 valuation, which was roughly 867 million, almost 868. You can literally add that 11.9. And this is not Terry thing. This is how ODE is going to look at this when they think, all right, can you issue this much debt in Ohio Department of Tax? They don't look at how the economy was. They don't look at your fiscal emergency. They don't care about external factors. They look straight at the numbers, and that's it. So I added 11.9% to that and looked at, all right, what is our total debt that we could issue at this point? And that's roughly $116 million. Right now, the issue is, like buildings we're standing in right now, and our others we built, we have debt sitting out there that we have to subtract away from the $116 million. We have just a little under $52 million at this point. So the resulting amount of the roughly $64.5 million is how much debt you can actually issue. This is all in law. It's what they call the direct limit or direct debt limit limitations. The only other way that you can go around and issue more debt is you have to do an OSFC project. Ironically, the way the law is, and I discussed this with the attorney for a while, and he's argued many times with the Ohio Department of Ed and ODT about this because it doesn't make any sense. You have to jump through all these hoops if you don't do an OFC project. You have to look at these trends, you have to look at the percentages and everything. On the flip side, if you do an OSFC project, whether you do the local partnership expedited one, or you do the regular one, the classroom facilities one, they kind of throw these ratios out, and we could actually issue 130, 140 million in debt, and it wouldn't matter. Ironically, it's the same debt, same people voting and everything, but they take those restrictions away for some reason. Even though we would get, I know roughly it's supposed to be around 14% that we're supposed to get in return. So say if you got a $120 million project, say you're getting 17 million out of it from the state, you got to come up with the other 103 yourself. If your share, the way OSFC is set up is if your local share, say, is 103 million, you can actually do up to 50% more, contribute, and add to the ballot. So literally, you could take 103 and add another 51 million to it, 51 and a half. You could literally put 150 million on the ballot for voters to approve or not to approve if you do an OFC project. But when you look at it based on how the law is written and you don't do it, you're at around 64.5 million. So to me, it's kind of kind of crazy if you think about it. You can issue almost 3 times as much doing the project, and you're only getting $17 million from the state, roughly, on a $120 million project. Or you go without OSFC, and you can't issue that much debt at all because you have to be within these restrictions. So with that all being said, you know, we're not going OSFC because obviously we're, you know, as Craig said many times, we're on the list clear down the bottom.
511.
Yeah, out of what, 604 or something like that?
Yeah, I think, Christie, did you say they're somewhere in the
So,
400s now?
let me, I'll pull up.
Yeah, so I mean, we've
my
got a while.
OFCC information.
Thanks, Craig.
Do you want me to walk through my OFCC thoughts, or do you want to keep going?
No, let him finish up this.
Yes, I'm just saying, yes, that's pretty much it, but at this point, yeah, I mean, we're gonna, you know, that is what we can issue right now legally, that is it. Now, this number can change a little bit because of the projections. ODE may look at ODT and say, you know what, your projection's off a little bit, we're gonna change it, but it's not gonna change my mind. They're gonna look at the same trend that we have, they're gonna use the same figures, hopefully, and say, all right, this is where you're gonna be. Like I said, there's been some other districts around here actually have the same problem right now. When you have some outstanding debt, you've got some newer buildings, you know, it's not paid off, it's gonna limit what you can issue at that point. And like I said, we've got roughly, not quite 52 million still outstanding from our 06 bond issue from building the intermediate junior high and additions onto the high school, and then also we purchased I'm trying to think how many buses we purchased back in 06, I know it was a few, it was at least 10 or so.
Yeah.
And I think we purchased some technology and stuff back then too, based on the bond issue itself. So right now, like I said, we're limited, you know, roughly 64.5 million, give or take a little bit if ODT changes in ODT.
Terry, how much on that $51.8 million on the current debt, how much do we pay off on that? How much comes off of that debt?
Just a few million a year, at best, yeah. A lot of it's interest, unfortunately, because when you're talking these bonds and everything, you're in long amortization schedules, you're paying a lot of interest.
And that
Much like a house mortgage.
that 51 million is what we refinanced last.
Well, that's part of it, actually. That is, there's a couple different issues in there, but part of that refunding is included in that, and this is all of it added together.
So, and if I'm hearing, I just want to make sure that in layman's terms here, basically what they're saying is the total maximum debt that we can issue for our school district based on the numbers in front of us at this point is 116.5.
That's the total, yeah.
That's total. Now, we
Back
take
up.
back off what we already have, which is around 51. At this point, all we can issue or ask for is 64.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And there's no known exception process or anything.
No, the only way to get around it is to do an OSFC project. And then they, like I said, they throw these percentages and trend analysis and all out the window for some reason. To me, it doesn't make any sense. The attorney said he's argued with them many times for other districts over the years and said, we looked at it and said, you know, it's up to your voters whether they want to approve the general obligation debt or not, whether it's 10 million or 200 million. They're gonna look at it and vote it. And it's funny because you go through this analysis, like I said, it's, you know, it's a little over 64 million. You can go the other route, it'd be 100+ million. It doesn't make any sense to me. How can you do it one way, not the other? But that's the way the laws are set up, unfortunately.
Terry, explain to me again what the difference is between going this route and going the other route. What hoops do we have to jump through?
Well, and Chrissy probably answers them better than myself, but the OFC guidelines, like if you do a project right now, and that's where like Chrissy will always say, all right, well, OFC says this is their recommended square footage for this or that. You have to buy, you have to build compared to what their guidelines say and what they approve. Essentially, if we go our route, right, Chris, we can essentially build
You build whatever you
whatever we
want.
want. Yeah.
Right.
So-
If that was your question, was your question the difference between OFCC and
Yeah,
non-OFCC, or was your question when you were talking about once you're in the 4 to 9, once you exceed 9%, you have additional hoops?
Oh,
No.
yeah, I'm not sure. Okay.
Okay, you were talking about the difference between OFCC.
And like design build.
Okay, well, let me talk, or is
Yeah,
there anything
but
else?
that's all I've got though.
Okay.
So that's our new number right now.
Anybody have any
Where we're gonna
additional
be.
questions for Terry?
So,
Because I know you had some comments on
Yeah.
Just to clarify OFCC stuff, yeah.
Is there another printout?
Oh,
Oh,
Terry.
I'm sorry. That's all.
Another page? That's
That's
okay.
what I
Thank
think.
you.
so Randy, when we became aware of this last day or so, we asked Christie to look at that, look at the options, and dig into this a little more.
Sorry, I'm not sure what you said.
I'm sorry.
I'll speak up. I will tell you, the last feedback I got from Surrey was that wasn't very nice.
Yeah, I know what
Maybe
you're
that's what he
saying.
was trying to do, is clarify what you said.
So,
hours today to do as much problem solving as I can get out of my head. So I'll pass this out, which is a potential direction we can go, knowing that our new cap is around that 64 million. But to answer the OFCC question, just so that everybody's on the same page, Little Miami is currently number 511 in terms of their equity number for OFCC. Every year, OFCC evaluates every district in the state, and you have an equity number assigned to you, and that equity number is based on the valuation of your district. So number 511 for Little Miami can fluctuate, and so you can see in 2007, Little Miami was 479 on the equity list. Then you started getting a higher and higher number, I'm guessing, as your community started to grow. So you were, in 2015, you were at the highest at 530. The last 2 years, we've actually dropped a little bit. So right now, we're sitting at 511. Every year, OFCC allocates about 400 to 500 million worth of construction for schools. That typically equates to 10 to 15 school districts getting their offer from OFCC, where they're able to go and partner with OFCC. Back in 2011, they created what is called the priority list. The priority list is when your number gets pulled, OFCC gives you a call and says, hey, do you want to partner with us? A lot of times districts aren't ready. They're like, no, we're not ready, and they'll defer or they will decline. So over the years, a lot of school districts have deferred or declined. They then make the priority list. So there is a group of 114 districts right now that are sitting on what's called the priority list. They've received their offer, but they haven't been able to act on it. As soon as they are ready and want to act on it, all they have to do is pick up the phone, call up OFCC, and they trump everybody else that is still in line. And what has happened, and they enacted that in 2011. So before 2011, if you deferred, too bad, you missed your opportunity. Well, now all those districts are getting that opportunity. So what has happened is that those 10 to 15 school districts that end up getting projects each year, 10 to 11 of them are from that priority list. So nibbling away at the actual numbers that are still in line that haven't been offered is getting really slow, because folks that previously deferred are now coming up out of the ground saying, yeah, we're ready now. So for example, this year, there are 15 districts that are sharing funding with OFCC. 11 of those 15 are from the priority list. So we were only able to knock off 4 from the main equity list. Right now, there are 33 districts ahead of us, ahead of Little Miami, on that equity list. So worst case scenario, if all 33 said, yes, I want to work with OFCC, you can do the math. It would take 8 to 10 years before you got your offer. The reality is that a lot of the districts now, because the percentage that OFCC is offering the districts, because we are so far down the list, a lot of districts do defer and decline because they don't want to have to follow all of the OFCC guidelines. So the big question is, well, how long do we think it's going to be before OFCC picks up the phone, calls us, and says your number has been pulled? We don't have a crystal ball. It could be that next year 32 districts decline, and lo and behold, you get a call next year. Do I think 32 of those 33 are going to decline? No. But I do think that probably within 3 to 5 years, we will get the call from OFCC. So, with that in mind, I will pass out. Keep in mind, all I've had is today, okay? So, I have done my best to come up with So this is my first ad, it's not fully vetted. You guys at these tables are gonna have to share. And this is, okay, so. No. So, what I've done is I kind of took option, where we left off at the last work session, we were debating between option 1C and 2C, with most people saying, in the perfect world, we would really like 2C. So what I did was I attempted to still try and accomplish 2C, but in order to meet this 64-ish million debt limit for our first bond levy, I created a phase 1A and a phase 1B. So what I am proposing is that as soon as OFCC picks up the phone and calls, that we accept their call and we take it, because that will then open the door to Little Miami being able to go after more funding. What it will mean is a bond levy much sooner than what we were thinking the second bond levy would be at. So I'm essentially creating a plan that takes one large bond levy that was gonna be over 100 million and creating two smaller ones, okay? So if OFCC calls us in 3 years, we say, yeah, we're ready, then we work with them to build that new high school building. That's what essentially we cannot do in this first bond levy. The high school alone would exceed the 64 million cap. So phase 1A, right now with my quick math and quick numbers, comes up to 64,925. I am sure that there is some massaging that we can do to get this to work. I am proposing leaving the high school building as the 9 through 12. I am not proposing pulling 9th grade out. I am suggesting that we put the addition on the high school, that is about 50,000. That will hold us off on that high school building, not for that full 8 years that we were originally talking about, but it should hold us off until the point when OFCC gives us a call. By not taking 9th grade, if we take 9th grade out and move it into the junior high, that ends up creating a much larger addition to the junior high, because that building currently has no high school support spaces in it. We will be much better off if we can keep that 9th grade in the high school and allow them to use those high school support spaces that are there. So that would then keep the junior high. We would do a sizable addition on the junior high, and we would put 6, 7, and 8 in it. If you remember, when the 1C option that we were talking about, what was that, last week? I don't know, it's all blending together. When it was 7, 8, 9, that addition needed to be 90,000 square feet. At 6, 7, and 8, for the same number of kids, that addition is 60,000. And that's really just because we are not needing that high school support space over there. So we can do a smaller addition to the junior high, so that'll become 6, 7, and 8. We are gonna have to keep Salem online. We cannot afford to replace all 3 elementary buildings. And given that Salem currently has 1,100 students, that's the obvious one to hold online. Because of the concern of the haves and have-nots, my suggestion is that we keep Salem as a district grade level building, such that every student in the district has to pass through Salem. So there is never the have and the have-nots. Everybody at some point would need to go through Salem. When Greg and I talked, we felt that slightly older kids than what's in there now would be able to utilize that building better than trying to keep the youngsters in there. So my suggestion is to have Salem accommodate 4th and 5th grade. We will need a new elementary. There's no getting around a new elementary, so we build a new elementary. This option looks a lot like option 2C, where we had 2 K through 3 buildings. So that's all I'm doing. I'm taking that from option 2C. So we have 1 K through 3 building serving 850 kids, and then the intermediate building, we put the addition on, and that new addition is there to accommodate PKK. So, all of that adds up to the 64.9. That will not hold us over, obviously the high school is the big piece. We cannot hold out for another 8 years to do that high school in this option. So the hope is that we get the call from OFCC in 3 to 5 years and we can have the second half of our bond levy, which that bond levy then phase 1B is your new high school. So when OFCC picks up the phone, that's when they come out, they evaluate your existing high school, say, oh yeah, you could use a new high school. So that next bond levy would be OFCC co-funded. So right now you're around, I think, 15%. That'll fluctuate. I can't guarantee that when we get the call, it'll be 15%. It might be 14, it might be 18, who knows? But that would be an OFCC co-funded project then. So we would be doing a new high school that would have to meet all of OFCC guidelines. But we can afford it then because we can exceed our debt limit and we don't have to follow all of those rules. And then you can see what phase 2 ends up looking like. Phase 2 right now actually ends up getting pretty small because we add slightly larger additions than we anticipated because we're holding on to the high school in phase 1.
What's the expectation on OFCC co-funding?
What is
The expectation, how much money will they cost?
They will most likely give us 15% of the cost.
15%?
15%. I think right now you're at 14. So somewhere, it could fluctuate a little bit. Right now, they're saying that you're gonna be at 14% when your number gets pulled. The reason why we have not considered, we didn't think that we were gonna use OFCC is that, one, we have to follow all those rules. As soon as we say, yes, we're gonna be OFCC co-funded, we have to follow the manual, there isn't flexibility, we're not gonna have 750 square foot classrooms like the existing high school has. You're not gonna have big corridors. You can if you add LFI. We're gonna have to probably add some dollars outside of OFCC's.
An example of one of the requirements for a classroom, every classroom on an OFSC site has to have a sound system in it.
Has to have a what?
A sound system so that you can be able to service hard of hearing people. So like the Lebanon Junior High, every single classroom over there has an FM sound system in it that's built in as a part of the specs.
Goshen did, Bobby, how long ago they do their new high school? 10 years ago, probably, 10, 11 years ago, and their cafeteria is a tiered cafeteria with a stage at one end, so they put cafeteria tables in there during the day, and it serves as their auditorium, because they don't fund
Right, they don't fund auditorium.
space.
Now, we can still build an auditorium in that next bond levy, it's just we have to add additional dollars above and beyond what OFCC says we need for a new high school.
Goshen only had, they got paid, the OFSC picked up 80%, Goshen only had to
Right.
pick up 20.
Right, so early, when, at the infancy, when you were lower on the equity list, I had a project that was 90% for Felicity Franklin, when I did that back in '99. But because you're so wealthy,
Yeah.
you only get 14%. And so then, when you're in that range, then you really start to question whether or not it's worth it. I would argue that you probably pay a premium on bid day because your contractors go, really? I have to I have to jump through all those hoops. Everybody has to jump through hoops. And that equates to time and that equates to dollars. So your bid day number is gonna be a little bit more. But it means that we have access to more money, which is, at the end of the day, what we need.
Christie, one of the
Yeah.
things you showed us in one of the meetings we had when we were talking about doing some additions to the high school was doing some larger classroom space on that.
Yep.
Where you're, is that in this
Yep.
addition that you're
Yep.
proposing?
That's what I'm proposing. So when I showed that diagram of what I would suggest adding to the high school to really be a 1,500 student high school,
It was those learning spaces,
Mhm.
there was a piece down there where we're gonna add by what is now the auxiliary gymnasium.
it
piece
wasn't
there.
all of those. So I've shown a couple diagrams. I
Just
showed
add-
one that had additions around, like, the whole building.
Right.
Yeah.
That was to go to 1,800.
Okay.
I also had one that was just 3 additions off of the academic wings.
Okay, and then the piece there
And
where
then
the
little-
library and the.
Yeah, and then maybe the library.
Okay.
No, that's if we want to go to 1,800.
1,800.
Yeah.
That's
You-
right.
I would not suggest doing all of that
Okay.
in this option.
So when you say wrestling band admin, tell me what you
Yeah,
mean when
what
you
does
say
that mean
wrestling
exactly?
band admin.
We probably won't do band, that's probably left over from when I copied
Okay.
the spreadsheet. I know, I told you that it wasn't fully vetted.
Oh, it's okay.
So,
We were building
It-
in flight today.
Right.
So what
That-
what can you,
So-
what would go away from, do you want to show this?
what
to
I,
everybody?
what I would suggest, the 50,000 square feet, I would focus on these 3.
3
The
additions down to the
3,
side?
yep,
Okay.
and I would focus on this piece right
Admin
here,
portion.
because they're gonna need more admin space, which is gonna
Admin
push into
space.
the media center, so we're gonna need a new media center. And then, I wouldn't do, this one I wouldn't do, that was
Back by
fine,
wrestling
yeah,
room,
wouldn't do.
would not do that.
I would not do that. We might do a small addition right here if the wrestling is really an issue. But I would argue that that would be,
And you wouldn't need to add, we had talked before about maybe you need to add an additional lunchroom space, or
No.
that, that's not necessary, as long
I
as we stay at
wouldn't do that
1,500.
because again, I'm shooting for 1,500 just to tide us over until we get the call.
So,
You might, the cafeteria is going to start to get tight. You will probably be using the multi-purpose room, but it's doable. What I don't wanna do is overbuild, knowing that we really are gonna probably build a new high school sooner rather than later. So I don't wanna have, overbuild on the existing high school for when it becomes a middle school.
So every time one of those 32, 33 districts defer, it says, no, we don't want to do it right now, whatever, we move up a space, is that right?
Yeah, we move up a space, they drop into the priority
they
list
go,
though.
yeah, they got separate.
So, when they do decide,
They, whatever.
then they would trump us, yes. But like, I know that just looking at the 33 districts that are ahead of you, I already know right off the bat, several of them that would not take OFCC money. Like Oakwood being one of them. Oakwood would not go OFCC. They have beautiful old historic buildings, OFCC would come in and tell them to tear them all down.
Did that,
Yeah, they did that.
So, yeah. What I do wanna do, which obviously I haven't had a chance to, I do wanna set up a meeting with OFCC as soon as possible to sit down and just show them what our thoughts are and make sure that they aren't going to throw any zingers at us, and make us do something that we don't wanna do.
Make sure as we work our, this building here would get an addition,
Yeah.
and it would be your pre-K and kindergarten building for the entire school district.
No, not the way I have, it could be, not the, right now, I took this from, option 2C.
Okay.
So this building gets an addition,
Of 450 seats.
and that 450 accommodates all of pre-K, because we do want all of pre-K in one building. And it accommodates a little more than half of kindergarten,
Okay.
okay?
Okay.
The existing wing has first, second, and third. Not all the district first, second, and third.
Because you're gonna have another
Because
building.
the new building will
That'll
also
have
have
K
K.
Be
through
right up the street.
They are right, and that's in, right, so if we could find, if there was another, if we had another site other than that 44 acre, given they're almost right next, it's unfortunate that you would end up with two K through 3 buildings so close. We could look at making one of these buildings PK1 all district, one of these buildings 2-3 all district, but we're adding another transition. And from what I felt I heard from the community, I think they would rather have two separate, even though they're geographically close. I think that your community would prefer to have their youngsters in one building for longer.
So the kids that typically would be your Morrow, Salem, Butlerville students in K through 3 would be district or zoned to the new elementary school on the, because you're keeping pre-K, all of pre-K, and then half of K.
Right.
And
Right here.
1,
There's a
2.
little more than half of, yes. The intermediate school ends up being
1, 2, and 3.
bigger.
The attendance zones are gonna be, again, because we have high population areas that are high density, and then we have large areas that are low density.
Yep.
You're not gonna really be able to draw a geographic line through the center of the district and divide
East and west.
east and west,
Right.
or north and south, or whatever, to say. So it's the numbers basically, the seats are gonna drive where you drive,
Right.
draw the attendance.
All your pre-K kids will be here on this campus.
Yeah.
And then a portion of your K through 3 kids will be here on this campus
Yeah.
in the existing portion.
Yep,
And the rest of your K through 3 kids,
yep,
however you decide, will be at a new elementary school on, up the street.
yep, yep, exactly. I mean, if we could magically find another site other than the current 44 acres and do a land swap to get them further apart between now and then, great.
And would we have to put any money into Salem to put your 4th and
That's-
5th graders in
That's
this?
what's, so in this, Greg, I'm glad you asked that, because in this 64.5 million that's sitting here, I have not folded in any dollars into Salem. So the question would be, how do we, because Salem is gonna continue to need. Now, we don't wanna put in the $6 million or $10 million that we had said if we were gonna hold on to Salem for 10 years. Because again, as soon as we get that call from OFCC, we design, build, Salem comes offline. So really, we're gonna be in Band-Aid mode, unfortunately, on Salem. So I don't.
We do pay off our 264 project in December of this year, and that's $611,000 in PI. So as we move through the next few years in this process,
We could invest some dollars there.
could probably siphon off some dollars to do some things over there.
Yeah.
So Chrissy, when
Yeah.
we talked the last time, I thought we were able to build a small elementary on the Salem site and keep Salem online.
That was build a new elementary behind Salem as soon as that building's done, demo Salem. You can't have both, you can't have two elementaries operating on that site at the same time.
Because of the busing.
It's not big, it's
space.
not, yeah, it's not big enough to have two buildings on that site.
And the timing wouldn't be when we would take it down Salem with the new high school. Like if we build a new elementary there on that site.
We're not, we need a new elementary in phase 1,
Before we
and
go.
we're not gonna need one in phase 1B. So that is one of the downsides with this, although I think we're potentially forced to do it, is that there isn't a plan for the Salem site. Because we can't use the Salem, because we have to build our new elementary and keep Salem online. So when OFCC calls us, we need to have a site for a new high school, and Salem gets demoed, but we don't know what goes back on Salem's site. I think it stays maybe a district site until you can warrant maybe having another elementary building.
Board office.
It's not included in these
I know.
numbers.
So.
Nor is
we're taking-
transportation facility.
We're taking, Mainville off-site, did we not use Mainville?
You could, there are no dollars in
Right.
here to renovate Mainville. But yes, you could.
Well, I'd get them out of the building.
Yeah.
Is there any particular reason why you could not take this 850 student elementary K through 3, which would be new build, and do with it like we talked about, where we would put it behind the current Salem, build it there, and then?
We need Salem to stay open after, when the 850 opens, you also need
Got it.
Salem to take 1,100 kids.
Okay.
So-
Yeah.
So this plan, as I'm looking at it, with this, I've got two questions. The
Yeah.
first one is, the high school, we're not actually adding any seats there. I'm looking at the green.
We
It
are,
doesn't say.
no, I am
It says enrollment
saying, I am,
capacity.
right,
So we're just making it bigger, but we're not necessarily having any additional chairs for students. Am I right on that?
Correct. I am
Okay.
I'm trying to fill the void that I think currently exists.
Okay, so, and then
I
the junior
think-
high is 600 additional?
Yes,
And then Salem, of course, is 1,100, then the brand-new building would be 850.
Yes.
And then
Intermediate.
the addition to the intermediate
Uh-huh.
would be 450.
correct.
My question is, if I'm only adding, this additional new building I see is 850, but these other two buildings, it's 1,050, right? If I close Butlerville and Mainville, I've got what, 200 in Butlerville and how many in Mainville? 450, so that's 650 kids
Right,
that are gonna go into these new seats that I'm creating over here.
yes.
So in reality, by closing these down, I've only gained 450 seats with $64 million being spent?
I would have to sit and do the math.
Well, if we're gonna close, Mainville, that's 450 or 400 kids.
This.
Right?
the-
So I have
right-
to find a spot for them, and then 200 kids in Butlerville, so that's 650 kids. So if you're telling me that I'm only adding 450, and then the brand new school at 850, 650 of those seats are already taken. Just by relocating them from Mainville to the
Right.
brand new building.
Right.
So I'm really not
So-
adding that many, I'm only adding the
600
you
plus
figure
250
eight.
plus 450.
So I'm getting about 1,200 seats for $65 million.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's skewed a little bit because of the addition to the high school. Now, I know that we will be that addition to the high school, while I say here that the enrollment capacity is 1,500, you're clearly gonna have more than 1,500 in that building. Because you're gonna be at 1,500 on day one you're gonna be over 1,500 on day one of this opening. So when OFCC picks up the phone and calls us, you're gonna be sitting in that building at probably 1,600 to 1,700. But I don't want to add additions to that building for 1,700 just for 1 year or 2 years.
Is there a difference in the cost per square footage for a new build as, like, a new elementary school as opposed to an addition? Is there a difference in square footage cost? Like, what you would be putting here and what you'd be putting at the junior high?
No.
Is gonna cost
No.
the same
Yeah.
per square footage?
Yeah,
if
it's
you-
gonna be, it's gonna all be approximately the same cost per square foot. I did not put a different cost per square foot for one building versus the other. They pretty much all come out to be about the same. You need more square footage depending upon the age that you are accommodating. That does change. But the cost per square foot is about the same.
when you said you can put PK one in one building and 2, 3, the only downfall that you see is that extra transition. That's the only downfall. As far as size, we could fit that way. if we
Yeah,
chose to
yes,
go
I
that
mean,
route.
we could, it might change the size of the, depending upon, because we would want those additions then based on enrollment per grade. So it might change the size of the new elementary and the addition to the intermediate. One might get bigger, one might get smaller. But yeah, I was trying to eliminate, because we would ultimately end up with kids in a building 2 years, 2 years, 2 years,
Right.
3 years.
But my thought was that with the kindergarten is, then you have 2 buildings you're districting, and then you're splitting AM, PM. That logistically is a nightmare. It's much better to have them together than to have to do that. And then you have to determine the AM, PM, and if they're that close together, you're gonna have to parent. I just see that as being a problem.
John, did you have something?
Yeah, just one question, because as we were also looking down the operating side of it and looking at the potential for income tax, earnings tax, et cetera, I was going through some of the data, and there is a process that you can follow where you can do like a lease purchase that's funded by an income tax. If we would have to pass an income tax, which would allow us to do, what's it called, certificates of participation.
Yeah, they're called COPS.
So it's basically a rent, a lease purchase, which you can use the cash flow from the income tax to fund the lease purchase. So it's acts like debt, but we don't think it falls under.
The state doesn't,
this
yeah, they don't
cap.
call it debt. You can get other districts around here, your welfare districts have done, where they've done total, they've built buildings. I know Sycamore Farm, for instance, they built.
They did their district office using COPS, I think.
Yeah, and I think they did Blue Ash Elementary, I believe, on COPS too, with a lease purchase agreement. You need a revenue stream, you need cash flow essentially to make the payments. They don't call it debt, but you don't have general obligation voted debt. You know, people paying the taxes to make the payments. You have to have your own cash. Now, the big question would be if you could pass it, yeah, an earnings tax, an income tax, you'd have that stream, but then it's a question, can you pass that to do it?
And there's lag.
It's essentially, you're taking income tax for property taxes, is what you're doing, but they don't
What
call
is
it
the
that.
Like an income or
Lag
earnings?
times were,
About 18 months. 18 months to get collections on it.
Is it an income tax or an earnings tax, as you're saying?
Earnings.
Well, which one, it'd probably be earnings, because income would,
Income tax starts the
Yeah.
first quarter. So if it's passed in November, it starts the first quarter. It takes
Yeah.
18 months to get the full.
The full
So
collection.
you get all of the
You get
estimated
some
payments
coming in, yeah.
throughout the year, or all of the employer deduction payments throughout the year.
Yeah.
So you could probably get,
full collections.
I don't know, 70% of it on a quarterly basis, and then, come April 15th in the final
Yeah.
collections, you get the balance. So it's a little bit of a slower burn, but
Yeah,
then you
it's-
get into the cycle. But you do start getting a sizable chunk of it early.
When I worked at Goshen, it took us forever to get it coming in. The thing, the earnings and the income tax, with your senior citizens, the earnings tax does not tax their
Exactly. We wouldn't earn
retirement.
Right.
So I think you'd have a better chance of passing an earnings tax than you will an income tax, because I've been told right to my face by wealthy people that they would never vote for an income tax.
Sure.
No, I would agree, and
Yeah.
I was looking at this, I can't tell from what was on ODT, if you can do the lease purchase through an earnings tax as well. It's just using the phrase of income tax, it's probably interchangeable.
Yeah, you can do earnings, as far as I know, too. It'd be one of the same.
But yeah, I tend to agree. It's just another option from a funding perspective, I think. Obviously, it comes with its own challenges as well.
Exactly. Now, there is one nice caveat to the lease purchases. They're subject to appropriation agreements. If you can't appropriate the money, essentially you don't have to pay the debt. Now, obviously, we're not gonna walk away from the school building, but they do make it subject to appropriation limitations on those. So it's just essentially, if you didn't have money coming in, you can appropriate it. You don't have to pay the debt, but like I said, you're gonna lose use of your building, obviously. Not gonna fund it, but you have to have a revenue stream. Like I said, many districts, they have cash flow, they have money sitting there. They can build, and they use essentially operating funds to pay for this. It's like a loan, pretty much.
I think it tends to be a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, it's a little pricier. Interest rates are a little bit higher on it. Because you don't have that full faith voted in by the taxpayers to make the debt payments.
And Terry, what would the the approximate village fee on the 64?
About 4.6.
What did you say again?
About 4.6.
4.6 now?
Right around 68.
64 million.
That could vary a little bit, that's at 5%, estimated at 35 years. Yeah, the village is a lot lower, you're spending a lot less, but you're getting a lot less square footage.
The high school's gonna feel like it's bursting within a couple of years of for phase 1A opening. I mean, that, in my mind, that 50,000 square feet gets you an appropriately sized 1,500 student high school. And on day one, you're gonna have 1,535. I think it's okay to feel tight for a while, to hold us over for a few years. I guess what I'm hoping is that, instead of originally phase 2 was gonna have an opening of 2027, 28, I'm hoping that we stick in the second half of our bond levy maybe 3 years earlier than that, such that we can get that new high school open before it's sitting at the 1,800 mark.
So, you're saying you would hope to have, you're saying the second bond levy, you're hoping to be in what year? What's the estimate?
I haven't, I would like to maybe see it in 2020, maybe 2024. It's gonna be totally dependent upon when we get the call from OFCC. Honestly, if they call us, a year after we open these buildings, I think we need to jump on it when we can.
So, but 2024, if we get if we're going to bond levy, then the high school probably won't open. To build a new one would take 3 years?
Well, you know what, so I said, I was hoping 2024 for opening, so bond levy, yeah, you'd have to pull that forward. So right now, we have bond levy in 2020, in 2017, I'm thinking 5 years later for the next one.
Yeah, but
Instead of 8 years later, like we were originally saying,
But if we don't get the OFCC, the question then.
is what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the.
Yep, that's the
problem
risk.
at that
Applies
point is
to
gonna be.
taking the risk. Yeah, but
We can't go any deeper into it except for what we've already paid
correct,
off.
you're absolutely right. If OFCC doesn't call us within 5 years,
Yeah.
Yeah, then you're in trouble.
yeah, yeah.
You're taking a $15 million gamble.
Well, yeah.
Basically.
Because
Right.
85% of the $88 million is about $75 million. So you're taking a $13 to $15 million gamble that they're gonna call you in the next, before you burst at the seams at the high
Well,
school.
we don't really have a choice, unfortunately, so it's,
What is the population for the 9-year bond in 2024?
I don't know that right off, in 2023, we're sitting at 1,680, so we're gonna be right around 1,700 in 2024.
So Christian, to put some rough numbers on these, I just took your $265 per square foot times whatever the square footage is for each one, so those are just round numbers. So this new K-3 building would be about 26.5 million,
Yes,
generically.
Yes.
I realize it,
yeah,
okay.
yep.
And the intermediate, the 35,000, we're not actually blowing it out to its capacity. We're only blowing it out for 450 kids, correct? You got
Yeah, we're
35,000?
adding enough such that that new wing is dedicated to PKK. Yeah.
Why wouldn't we, are we just trying to get 64?
If I make the 450, 700, then the 850 just reduces for the new elementary, and all you're doing is moving dollars. You still have to accommodate your kids, whether it's putting them in an addition in the intermediate or making your new elementary smaller. It's
Right.
the same dollars.
But
I
if my
would.
new elementary is smaller, then I can put it on a smaller plat. I can find property that I could possibly fit a smaller.
Yeah, but we're gonna want a piece of property that allows that elementary to grow. I don't want you to end up picking a small piece of property, and as you keep growing and growing, you can't
You have
put
to do
an
it
addition
again.
on that
Well,
elementary.
the problem is finding a piece of property.
Right,
And,
right, or going ahead and using the 40, or going ahead and using the 44
I'd
acres.
say that, I like that. It's there.
Hey, Chris,
The thing about how large your district is and what Western Middlesex is running.
It's like that one spreadsheet I sent out weeks ago about like, it was the average of like current, the OFC
Correct.
new projects they have.
Correct.
I did that also for they've got like 2 tabs on that page, new build, and one's like add-ons and renos.
Mhm.
Now, we don't know in a project how much is a reno and
Right.
how much is add-on, but like
Right.
to your question a few minutes ago about, are there any savings in add-ons? That segment of there, it was like 7 projects. The average, and that's probably in, they were finishing up on like 14, 15, maybe they were bidding
Right.
12.
Right.
But that average was like $170 a square foot. Just what I'm getting at is,
But you couldn't differentiate between what was add-on versus what was
Right.
renovation?
but I mean, if you're adding on at a site,
Yep.
less design, site development, bringing in utility, you don't think, I mean, even if you say 10 or 15% over your square foot, that's significant in your project.
The problem is that tends to get offset by literally the selective demolition and the complications of tying into the existing building. Honestly, it's a lot easier to build a standalone building than to come in, demo a section of a building and tie it in. That tends to offset the costs that
Which
are
I-
maybe
Right.
maybe you don't have to run as much utilities in
I
from
completely
the
hear what you're
street.
saying, but their numbers on those projects would support.
Yeah, I'd have to look at
You
the
had to look.
numbers.
You would know looking at those
Um,
schools if it was a renovation.
Yeah.
Or if it was
'Cause
really
I haven't had
I
this-
can
I
see if they're
haven't-
renovating, you're gutting
Yeah.
a building and renovating it, it costs much less.
Sure,
But,
yeah.
You said it was 170, 160?
yeah, it's like 169 something. I think I said.
Which honestly, that's a renovation, that's closer to a renovation
Right.
cost per square foot,
I'm just thinking if it's
not a
12
new
or
building.
15%, and, that's $8 to $10 million bucks, and
Yeah.
you do something extra somewhere.
That's right.
That's your admin building, or, transportation hub, or, so how does that process, to get bids, to get firm dollars,
Mhm.
do we pretty much have to have passed an issue, or can this summer, will contractors entertain bidding this for planning purposes, so you have better information to plan off of? Is there a way that the district can go get more concrete cost info before we have a vote and pass an issue?
Once we settle
Project?
on the actual
Then you can start
options,
laying out
I will
options.
be sitting down with the construction manager to talk, to see if we can refine the 265 a square foot.
Gotcha. But what's that process look like? Is that a 30, 90-day process?
No, that's just me sitting down with the construction manager saying, hey, spend the next couple weeks, give me some budget numbers.
Gotcha, okay.
As a builder that does K-12, give
Right.
me budget numbers for additions, for new build, for renovation.
Gotcha, okay.
The only thing I can say is typically, I typically do not see a different cost per square foot on an addition versus,
Fair enough.
versus a new build.
Do you have a specific builder you would rather deal with?
We have on our team, as part of our design team, we have Conger Construction doing our estimating and budgeting. So Conger's built a number of schools in my career.
But wouldn't
So-
we be required to go out for bid?
Oh, yeah, this is just to get you an this is
Okay,
just to confirm
okay.
our budget numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not gonna know
Okay.
bid numbers till it's designed and there's a whole set of drawings and, yeah. Yeah.
Christie, when you look at the addition to this building, and the configuration,
Mhm.
we currently have all of pre-K, K, building, could that addition be all of pre-KK
That's what.
with 1-3 on the?
Yes, that's what this looks at. So what I did was I sized that existing wing. I took the classrooms over there and essentially divided by 3. And that determined my enrollment capacity for 1st through 3rd grade. And that then kind of dictated how many kindergarten I was gonna put over here, because I was gonna match the kindergarten to the kids over here. And then PK was all of PK. That's what drove that
I was
addition to
talking
the
about
other.
the addition all of pre-K and
And
all of K
K.
in this wing here, and then
Okay.
the new elementary, and then 1-3
Yeah,
and
we could,
1-3.
yeah, you could do that. Yeah, you could do that.
I'd rather have.
Again, all you're doing is, so instead of 450,
Yeah, but you're just
we
moving
have a
dollars.
675.
Yeah, you're shifting sites, but you're
Right.
moving
The
dollars.
size of the
Right.
buildings are gonna stay the
Yeah.
same, and the size of the addition stays the same?
No, the 850 building gets smaller, because that would only be serving,
It'll be 1 to 3.
635.
Yep.
Is it gonna
And,
be grades 1 through 3?
yeah,
Because you're gonna have half of 1-3 here and half.
Oh, you're dividing,
And the
you're
other-
also putting the 1st and 3rd to the 2. Okay.
in these
On the other
classrooms that are designed to be
Gotcha.
regular elementary, yes.
So that just moves the dollars.
It
from
just
one
moves the dollars,
to the other,
yeah.
but it keeps us, it gives us
Yep.
that flexibility to
Yep.
put them together and less than.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts on the 2 elementaries being so close?
Well, the thing is, we were just talking, Morrow and Butlerville, they're not, I mean, here we are over in this area. That's one of their big complaints, where we always, this place always, this site, these sites always get it.
And I will tell you, I just got a map from the auditor's office, it's half the size of my wall, and the growth and all the streets and all the kids come from here.
I know
So,
that.
I understand that, and I don't, I feel for that, but logistically and
Well, I
the
think it
way,
makes sense.
I mean, it's hard not to do that, because
Because
that's
we
where
own
our
the
kids
land.
are.
Because we
We're
own the
pulling
land.
kids
Exactly.
from Oregonia to take them to Butlerville.
Right.
That's a busing night. I mean, it's just so much that we're doing to accommodate for that, and I don't know that that's always the best thing to do.
We have to work with what we have, we have to stay within our means here.
And we
I
do
understand.
have the township that is looking at centralizing its emergency services as
Mhm.
well. It looks like
Yep.
they're
Read
going to
that.
close 2 firehouses and build a new one at some point here. And it's gonna be down, I think the location's probably adjacent to the township building. And so, as we look at building out on the outer edges, if we wanna do that, we already know that response time to the high school and junior high site is gonna be impacted, when they close down, Station 77.
When we do the 3, whatever classroom space additions on the end of the high school building, where the
Right.
circle is,
Right.
whatever you wanna, does that drastically configure your access getting out of the building over there? Does that drive just,
I don't think so. I think that there's enough room. When I looked at the,
Without
because that's
losing-
the 1,800 option, when I looked at the 1,500 option, the wings might be a little bit smaller than what's shown on there.
okay.
I don't think that we need to rework,
the-
I was
the
hoping to
pavement?
not have to rework that drive, yeah.
They're on the loading dock.
Yeah.
up there. You know, the cornfield? Yeah. Oh, okay, gotcha.
Greg, when you're talking about the high school too, I struggle with the semantics of some of this stuff. Because at high school enrollment this year is like 1370, pushing 1400.
Yeah, we're about 12.
Oh, okay. I thought it was
right
higher.
now. And 100
Gotcha.
112 kids are at the career center.
I don't know. So that's some issue.
Oh.
I thought there were more kids there.
No, there's not, and that's why I struggle, because they already complain at 1,200.
I'm too old to miss a class at full all the time.
sure, absolutely.
Mhm.
I know we don't like it, but I think we have to. I don't know what putting
Just
utilities on us will cost,
Logistically,
but
does it make sense to you?
you're gonna have to put utilities on wherever you build, so.
Not for
Right.
utilities, but just because of the proximity of the
Well, I
two
understand that.
elementaries. I mean, you don't see districts that do that, you know, they,
Well, Mason did.
They
They
put
have
'em
all
right
their
together.
stuff centered. But they're
you see that as the
They're 28 square miles.
community supporting that.
Well, I mean, from a fiscal standpoint, you own the 44 acres. If you didn't own the 44 acres, yeah, you would probably never suggest going and purchasing it and buying it there, but you have it, so unless you find a land swap.
I think to your point, Nancy, you were talking about the population density. I think if you, when it's election time and you're talking to people, I think if you create the right visual, that's population density and it's like a heat map or something like that, and where our lots are approved in the district, and
Right.
think about how it'll look in 10 to 20 years for the population density. I mean,
Right.
it works at Mason because Mason's so small and it's landlocked, right?
Right,
But
right.
that's, we're not gonna see growth throughout our whole 100 square miles in the future with our rapid growth. It's really
And the
gonna
other
be
piece,
within
yeah.
2 to 3 miles of here.
The other piece to look at here is, do you, when we're looking at this, do you want to stay grade level? So do you want a pre-K 1 building and a 2-3 building? So if you did that, and one of these buildings was a pre-K 1 and the other one down
I
on
could sell that.
44 acres
I could
was a
sell that.
2-3, or if you one of these each,
They're gonna be that close together, there really
I
is no
think
reason
that-
not to.
I
If
could
they're-
sell
If
that.
they're,
Right,
that-
right.
if they're on either end of the school district, then I think there's an argument to be made to keep,
right.
have, both of them have K through 3 or whatever in it, but if you're only, less than a mile away from each other, maybe that is the right
Yeah.
play to.
Yeah, I don't
if
see
you
a
go-
problem if we do
From
it
my
that way.
perspective, this building would be more suitable for second and third grade, and then you build on your new building would be a pre-K.
Well, we would need to, I mean, that's something we would wanna make that decision.
Right.
Before soon, because what we don't wanna do is build PKK buildings here and then not need them as PKK down the road.
Right,
And then there's an open land that starts off of their property.
So if we're at our, if we look at this and we say, yes, this is what we wanna do, and we're at 64 million, where does the money come from to put improvements in Salem and to create a board
That'd have to be
office?
HB 264.
Yeah, I think it's,
And the HB
it's taking the
264
dollars
is
that you're
much
currently
further.
paying for
Yeah.
hospital.
And we've already
You've got
used
about
that.
610,000 or so after we pay off the 264. We have, what is it, Terry, a little over 2 million in PI that we get every year.
About 2.4.
But
So
we
between
also-
that, we could renovate the buildings and put money into Salem to keep it online? That would be another.
That's where,
Renovate what?
I mean, that would be the only place that we could go, really, other than operating.
Do some renovation to keep it up.
Yeah,
But
we
the other
would
thing,
have
we have,
to.
yeah, we'd have to, because, but the other thing, didn't we say, or haven't we spoke, maybe you and I had this sidebar, Greg, on the central office, if we go down to this building down here, we're looking at 200,000 plus. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think,
And the build
Christie
outs
gave me
is
some updated numbers. to
higher
build
than
the
that?
space out. It's probably $50 to $70 a square foot to build the interior
So what,
out.
about 400,000?
Yeah.
So
4 to 5.5
For
to 6.
temporary living space.
What's that?
I've got the numbers.
Yeah, it's between it'll be.
It'd be
probably
pushing
between
4 to probably
400
up to
to
5.
500.
So, you know,
And that's just to renovate it so we can use it for a
Yeah.
few years.
That's just the
Well,
building.
That's right.
We're looking at trying to get a 4-year lease with a 5-year option. But it could be the way things play out, we might.
so if we had to put, let's just say it was a 4-year lease and it only costs 400,000 to renovate it, we've got 100,000 a year of the HB money going out right there. So, you know, we gotta ponder that.
If you get fortunate with any cost savings too, if you get lucky, cost savings you go through renovating sites or
Mhm.
busing admin space.
Right.
Of the grade levels that we're looking at, really the 4th and 5th grade.
Mhm.
5th and 6th grade used to be at the Salem site.
Yeah.
So that building really is be better adapted for fourth and
agree.
fifth grade kids than the current student population.
Mhm, definitely.
And if we do that, we can keep the transportation hub there for a little while. If we-
Yeah, it can, I mean,
About 52.
it could always stay there if you wanted it to.
Well, we got-
I
Yeah,
mean,
at this point,
because
yeah, at this point,
There's no way
because
to
if
move
we,
it.
if we build this building that we're talking
Oh,
about
then
here,
eventually Salem will come offline
Right.
and do a high school. You'll have that site to, if you wanna
do
add
with-
your
with
transportation.
whatever you wanna
space.
do with, right?
Yep.
Of course, then everybody's gonna be like, oh, you have a busing system, and all you're supposed to have.
Good point.
I didn't hear what
So
you.
why do you have all your buses there and all your schools are
Oh.
over here, but, you know, there's nothing to say that we
Gotta
couldn't
have
build.
someplace to
But
park.
there's nothing to say we couldn't build a high school down on that, somewhere down on that in the town as well. Right, if we found a
You think
piece
it's
of
fine?
Yeah,
property.
if you
It's
took
not all
the
that far away
K3
from the high school.
44 acres,
Mark, the 52, 44 and a half.
How many acres is the Salem site again without the bus
How
barn?
long was it?
31.
Approximately 30-something.
What is it with,
31, 32.
what is it with the bus?
Is it up on the
They
corner?
did it.
it is,
Um,
No, it wasn't.
wasn't it?
Those
The
two
bus,
buildings go out to
the bus
34.
facility needs 10
17
acres.
years.
What is it now?
Everything else is short.
Salem and the
Trying to
bus
take
garage,
the
what does that
district's
sit on, how much?
cost savings
I
go
don't
up.
know, let me look it up, I can't
It's only
remember.
7
Too many
years.
numbers.
Because the new high school is 44 acres.
Um,
That's where the high school is now.
It'll be
That's why I'm thinking like, if we gave that down like the method, you know, like this,
64.
back to Salem.
I don't know.
What if,
I
I'm
guess,
thinking if we.
is
just
the
went up
current high
hill-
school site
I don't know,
smaller
that
or
would-
larger than the Salem site?
Oh, it's larger.
they look larger.
I
With the
thought
bus
that the whole
garage?
Salem site was
30.
35,
That's with,
somewhere in the
with the
30s.
transportation.
With the bus garage.
Including the
thing.
transportation.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's-
Too small.
It's like
Oh,
30.
All right, I
absolutely, okay,
misunderstood.
way too small for a high school.
All right.
Eventually.
Yeah. If that's
How much
really
would
small.
be ideally for a new transportation hub? For-
10.
So if we were fortunate enough to acquire that Fletcher property, and with this plan, you're not committing to future massive expanses at the high school long-term, that's 10 acres. I mean, if you make the access work and the traffic issues, could potentially.
Yeah, if we, the big key is seeing how the access.
I was gonna say, the
would
big thing
work.
I would have, you know, what the state would say, on the access
And
to
if we're
the.
gonna take Salem down eventually, we need to use that site for something, so I don't know why we wouldn't just consider leaving transportation.
That's a good piece of land.
I don't
We
think
don't want another
it's not
site
an
with
answer.
nothing going
Let's
on,
come up with
Good
an
for
one.
all of us to go there.
building a new building,
Yeah.
there, you mean? We could eventually, yeah, but if we acquire Rivers Bend, and that's, I mean,
Yeah, I think just, I mean, fuel savings is nominal, but I mean, at some point, if you have an opportunity to bring it close to your central buildings, you're providing a cost savings just in that extra mile or two.
Just logistics.
Of driving. The gas bill's gotta be pretty expensive.
so then they'd be going out to all ends of the district regardless of where they are.
Yeah, I don't
A
know.
couple of years ago, I spent about $500,000. Diesel.
I can imagine
Came down
it's gonna be
to
that big of
about
a
3 cents.
savings. Might be some, but yeah.
But I mean, if it's tens of thousands of dollars a year for the life of the facility, adds up.
I mean, it's true.
We still have to travel the 98 square
Yeah.
acres with our buses.
Yeah, right, so if you're starting your buses out closer to the hub,
Of the
you know, they're running
population,
multiple
right.
times a day, right? So,
You could drop your, yeah, it would drop some.
where
maybe
where a bus
1%.
drops a kid off, if it's driving half a mile to a bus garage and not 2.5 miles,
If you say
3 or 4 times a day while it's parked or whatever.
Right.
You're creating mileage
Well, you're
savings.
picking up, you know, like you say, 8 miles a day.
I mean,
or
who knows what
whatever.
a number is, but
Because you, when you look at that 44 acres.
I think Gene tells us
Yep.
that at some
and
point
we
that facility
say we built
in the not too distant
elementary
future has to
down
be
there at
addressed.
44
It does.
Yes.
We know that.
Elementary in such a way so that in the future,
Yes.
if we wanted to relocate
Yes.
transportation onto that 44
Absolutely.
acres,
Bucks in the
we could
bucket.
do that.
Yeah, and I was gonna suggest that, if that new elementary goes on that 44 acre, that we're very strategic about where that building gets located. And that it doesn't just go plop right dead center in the middle of the site, but to plan for being able to, even if it was section acreage off and sell it. Cause you don't need all 44 acres. I
So
mean, you
this,
could sell off a
this
chunk of it.
building that we're talking about putting in 44 acres,
Mhm.
the 26.5 mil rough
Yeah,
feasible.
yep.
That doesn't include, we have no utilities over there, to my understanding.
There would be, I'm assuming, yeah, there
So
will probably
those
be
would
some
have to be
additional,
brought in.
that's true,
No
there probably are
utilities at all.
some additional costs for the infrastructure, which I don't know what all that, I don't know what all is needed there.
But you're